In 2010, the California Endowment initiated a 10-year program known as Building Healthy Communities. The City of Fresno was among 14 sites chosen to implement it. Fresno was chosen due to the existing health disparities and inequalities, and because they knew that in the southern part of the city, community power had already started to blossom.
Started in 2013, Fresno Building Healthy Communities, our coalition, were working on the general plan in the city of Fresno.
It sort of tells decision makers, lays out the roadmap for growth and investment over time.
Where new parks are going to go, where businesses are going to be located, where new housing is going to happen.
It's a 30-year plan.
30 years from now, it's not really about us, right? It's about the young people in our community. We were sharing about land use and what it meant to be involved in the general plan work.
And we started meeting with neighborhood groups. We started meeting with partner organizations. And then we started really focusing on talking to youth.
It was actually young people at the time, a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds that we went to meet with, asked us why we weren't talking about parks. And that's really when we uncovered the fact that most Fresnans in the south portion of our city did not have access even to a green space.
Nearly half of the residents of Fresno don't live within a 10-minute walk to a quality park or open space.
They needed to take at least 3 buses to get to the nearest park where they could actually engage in active play or just have grass or trees.
Every year, there's an organization called the Trust for Public Land, and they do a survey of parks across the United States.
It's a report card of the top most populous cities throughout the country.
For many, many years, Fresno was dead last, basically, in park coverage.
I always knew that there was something wrong. When I go around my neighborhood, there's factories, dead grass. People usually tend to stay indoors. You can really notice it when you go into other parts of Fresno, particularly North Fresno, and you see just so much green space.
Hyde Park was built on top of a dump site. Contrasted to Fig Garden Loop Park in Northwest Fresno, and there was a ballpark. There was a play structure. It looked new, it was green, and it was just like, yeah, this is a stark disparity.
What we find in places like Fresno is that in low-income communities, communities of color, they have no parks, or the parks that they do have are smaller.
In Fresno, it's got a long and notorious and well-documented history of redlining.
It began by the government's intention to help spur economic development through increasing home ownership and therefore increasing generational wealth. But what happened in that program that began in the mid-1930s is that the way that those home loans were given, it was determined that there would be maps created to say these are the desirable parts where these loans should be given. Coincidentally, those maps also were outlined by race. African American, Latino, other people of color were not invested in because they lived in those parts of town where they were in the red zones, where those home loans would not be favorable to be given.
We have to look at the history of racism and discrimination in this country because it shaped how we live, where we live, what we have access to, what parks we can play in.
For me, I went out to an area in North Fresno around Fig Garden Loop Park, and I just saw all the different things that were happening in this park. There's people playing volleyball, there was people having picnics with their families, and that to me was incredible. I thought, man, that's amazing. To be able to have that at a park and have it be accessible and open to the residents there, that's what I want for my area.
Not everybody grows up in a community where there's train tracks right across the street from housing, or where there's dilapidated buildings and broken windows and all of these things that I grew up thinking were just part of, urban living. But in fact, that's not the reality that some of our neighbors experience in North Fresno.
That's not an accident. That was deliberate, intentional policy driven by the government.
The city of Fresno started to limit their investment in parks. Not only were they not planning for future parks, they were taking money away from existing parks by redirecting those funds. In the gap of 10 years at that time, they had cut the parks budget by more than 50%. They had laid off more than 60% of the facility's maintenance staff. There were systematic actions that resulted in those parks being in poor and very poor status. It didn't just happen.
1989 Parks Plan envisions land for all Fresnans. Park Plan expands for Hooves. City seeks money for improvements.
We found out that our Parks Master Plan had not been updated since 1989.
Which is supposed to guide the development of parks in our community to keep up with population growth.
If it's not updated, then you don't know where investments will be going.
And that's really what set off, at least for Fresno Building Healthy Communities, the focus on making sure that we elevated parks as integral and necessary for our communities to thrive.
Advocacy on the general plan.
Young people went out and surveyed the parks. They went out and they started checking like what services and amenities exist at parks, how long does it take you to get to a park, which neighborhoods have parks and which don't. And that really helped inform our advocacy on the general plan.
And they used this information to fuel their campaign for equity.
And it became really clear very early on that parks were important to everyday Fresnans and that they needed to be just as important to decision makers.
The young people of Fresno and Fresno Building Healthy Communities showed exactly how to take control, try to change the circumstances into which so many of them were born into. And they organized themselves and they created a campaign called Parks for All.
My first Parks for All event was an event that the young people hosted a Parks Forum at Yokomi Elementary School. I was really impressed.
It was so impactful to see that young people were just asking for something that should be a public good.
In that moment, I felt very inspired that I was able to have this direct communication with the person who represented me, folks in city council who had the power and position to provide resources to my community.
Getting to see Efrain, getting to see Antonio, share their story and do this work, it was amazing for me to see, oh, even as a young person, I still can make impact.
After school, we would gather all of the materials that we needed, put on our Parks for All t-shirts, bring the flyers and stuff to go out into the neighborhoods to door-to-door knock and tell them about the events that we were doing and what date and what time so that they can show up.
Young people that were using data, they were using facts, they found evidence, they built a solid campaign for changing the way the city invests in parks and tackling that obvious inequity in terms of the northern part of Fresno and the southeastern part of Fresno.
In the city of Fresno, if you live south of the city, there was only about 1 acre of park space for every 1,000 residents, compared to almost 5 acres in North Fresno.
I think seeing those statistics were the most jarring to me.
It really shocked me because it wasn't necessarily something I thought about. I never put two and two together of hey, why is it that we have less park space?
In the general plan, one of the policies that we were able to get into that plan was that the city of Fresno shall update the Parks Master Plan. And that word was really important because it became a directive, not a maybe they're going to do it, but they have to do it.
One of the goals was to raise awareness about the disparity and the need to invest in parks across the city of Fresno.
Fresno BHC developed these beautiful graphics that had a picture of a little girl, and on one side was in color and on the other was in black and white, that put the city's own data on a bus wrap.
With the hope of inspiring them to join our efforts to call for more and better parks in the city of Fresno.
A worker was putting the wrap on the bus, and the then city manager say, wait.
The city of Fresno saying that we could not put up that ad because it was too political.
What happened when the city of Fresno chose to ban that bus ad is that they forbid the knowledge to be out there to the rest of its own residents.
So we knew whatever tactics that they were trying to do However, they were trying to censor us, that we had to keep going and we had to be creative.
What we decided with the young people to do at that point is, well, if the city's not going to honor that ad, we'll just blow that up and we'll have a press conference and we'll share that information anyway.
I was at that press conference. It had the opposite effect of what the city wanted because it got more attention.
The City of Fresno decided that the sign behind me, this beautiful sign with this lovely young girl, is too controversial and too political for all of you to see. We're here today because we need a funded Parks Master Plan that our city has promised to create more green space for all residents, but especially for those in South Fresno.
That was probably the most beautiful gift the city could have given the community.
It really created an opportunity for folks to come out and share their stories, their experiences with having to play in a patch of dirt that wasn't even a park, that the city called the park, that was actually a landfill.
That led to community leaders, saying, why are you trying to not make public a disparity between who has access to parks and who doesn't?
In Community Matters, controversy over an advertisement about parks in Fresno. A group called Building Healthy Communities contends there is more park space in wealthy areas of Fresno than there is in low-income areas. They say parks impact the health of people who live in those neighborhoods.
18-year-old Antonio Hodegi grew up in Calwa and said kids just want a safe place to play.
Whether it be playgrounds, monkey bars, skate parks, a pool, things like that they're not in your backyard, and they're not in your neighbor's backyard or anything.
A local civic group is fighting to get its message on Fresno city buses. The group Building Healthy Communities paid the city $25,000 to put an ad about the lack of parks in South Fresno on 6 buses for 1 month. But the city manager decided the ad was too political.
I think what is political is how the city hasn't invested properly into Southwest Fresno.
Not only were we able to get local media coverage for the censorship that was happening,
And we also made that connection between parks and public health, so that really got more residents involved.
Why not join a movement of young people and community leaders who are trying to make sure that everyone has access to a park?
We couldn't see it at the time, but reflecting on it now, no action is too small.
We really connected residents to their voices and talked to them about being advocates for their neighborhood parks.
In a way, it kind of worked out, right? Not as we maybe had planned, but it still worked out.
The wonderful thing is that in Fresno, many of these young people came together and said, we're not going to accept this. We need parks for all.
Like all good work at Fresno Building Healthy Communities, it's always starting with young people, leading us to do cleanups in different parks throughout South Fresno specifically.
It was just like an open event for the community to come, for youth to come and just play at the park.
We were out there and having all of activities for the kids to participate in.
Here in South Fresno, we don't have a lot of these resources. We don't have the green space. We don't have enough parks. So, just to have Fresno Building Healthy Communities and Fresno State, it's really good for the kids, and we're pushing for more green space, so these kids can have more events like this.
They hosted things like Meet Me at the Park events, where they were hosting community members in parks just to be able to build community, to have fun in green spaces.
Organize things for people to do makes it a little bit more enjoyable and more likely that people will come out and continue to use it.
This was an organized effort for us to kind of build up that message that parks are important, and if you have access to parks, you can do all these fun things. The pop-ups that we would have at the parks were just a really fun way and a really grassroots way of just getting community together to just share space and have a good time at a park.
The beauty about Fresno Building Healthy Communities and the trust and the relationships that we've been able to build with community has been that when they ask for something, we listen. One of the parks that became really important and crucial was Romaine, which is located in South Central Fresno, which is highly utilized. And it was young people who said to us, well, we skate here all the time. We would love to have a permanent skate park that we could use to engage in after school and on the weekends. So they called again on us to make that happen.
We decided to build a skate park at Romaine Park.
And the focus there was to work with the city parks department to develop a plan to build out that park and then find resources to essentially develop the skate park.
We gave the opportunity for skaters, for youth, to go out and let us know what they wanted to see, what amenities did they want to see at this skate park.
We started working with some very famous skate park designers, brought them into Fresno.
And we said, we want you to engage with all these young people and ask them what they want and have them design the park itself.
The youth felt like they had a voice, they had a say.
And that was really the kickoff for a lot of young people to engage in planning and designing.
The young people would just go to the pictures. They would select what they would like to see, kind of like a voting system.
I learned a lot about rails and all of these kind of skating things that I had never thought in my life I need to know. But it was just beautiful because it also allowed us to reach a different audience, and that was skaters.
Being able to create a park is not just about a physical park. It's about creating a kind of a vision for a community in which we all matter, in which we're all connected.
It was a collective effort of adult allies who were helping us hold the space, and of young people helping to outreach to their friends to make sure that there's young skaters there to give their say, to feel like they had a voice in the process.
In the 5 to 7 years that I just kept going to Romaine, there were people there and utilizing that space. And I think to be able to give them proper structure and to do the activities that they love, I think it was really key.
Children and families in a South Fresno community now have a new and improved park, and in just a few months we'll also have a new skate park. A brand new state-of-the-art skate park will be replacing this 12-year-old park. Sandra Celadon Castro says South Fresno still desperately needs new parks.
Not only are they a place for folks to play, it also teaches folks to engage with their neighbors and be civically engaged and really be nurtured by the community.
Fresno Building Healthy Communities is part of a coalition advocating for more and better parks in areas that need them most.
That was a huge victory for us because when we had the ribbon cutting.
A skate park, 5 years in the making, officially open tonight to the public.
I was there when we cut the ribbon on Romaine Park.
More than 300 people showed up to the grand opening of the skate park at Romaine in central Fresno. The state-of-the-art facility is possible through the coalition Fresno Building Healthy Communities. They fundraised with support of the California Endowment after hearing about the need for better parks in Fresno, specifically on the south side.
Just the look of enthusiasm on these young people as they entered into the skate park and started doing tricks, and the kids on the BMX bikes doing their jumps and flips. They were so excited, not just because they had a skate park, but because they had designed this park.
Todo un éxito resultó la inauguración de la nueva cancha de patinetas ubicada dentro del parque Romaine.
And I just remember just the joy in the air, because it was not just the young people that had been engaging with us, but it was young people that had heard about it through the skate network.
Those kids are changed forever. They recognize that they can actually make things happen just through the sheer force of their will.
When you're doing this type of work, you do it because you care, but when you finally see that final product, it just feels so much better and inspires you to want to do even more.
That's an example of what happens when communities come together and invest in our community.
When community feel ownership in their parks, that they help build them, they help develop them, they help design them, guess what? They're going to look better. They're going to last longer. It's really inviting the community. It's starting with a blank piece of paper and just dreaming.
It was just the most beautiful thing that I had experienced at that point.
Brought into reality in their community through their efforts.
That experience and that one, it fuels people to think okay, I did that, what more can I do, right? And so they can stay engaged.
We also learned that skaters and BMXers share a park. So who's ever at the park first is a shared agreement. That if the skaters are utilizing the park first, that the BMXers wait until they're finished.
Fresno Building Healthy Communities says it is now focusing its efforts on building a bike park in West Fresno.
They said, we're in it for the long haul, but we also want to have some stuff now.
Community leaders held a second meeting where they unveiled the first renderings of the upcoming BMX park. It's going to be at the Mary Ella Brown Center. Organizers say they're using feedback from the first meeting to design a park that's suitable for all ages and skill levels. And officials are hoping the BMX park will motivate kids to get involved in healthy activity.
But it was again through the energy and leadership of young people.
Southwest Fresno breaks ground on world-class BMX park.
The project is groundbreaking in more ways than one. BMX bikers had a vision for Southwest Fresno.
This side's gonna have like a big old bank. It's gonna carve around. There's gonna be a lot of ramps and rails.
Ray Ibarra can't wait to give the quarter pipes a try.
This side of town needs something like this. They have nothing this cool, you know, and it'll maybe change their attitudes about their neighborhood and the way it looks, you know.
BMXers speak a very different language than we do, but they figured it out, and guess what? We followed their lead.
We had over 300, maybe 400 people out there enjoying the new BMX park and just being able to celebrate to have something new in their community because it's been so long since they have had investment.
The Parks Master Plan was really important because we needed to have an official document that really gave us a good idea of what is the current condition of our park system.
I think it took about almost 2 years from when they hired someone to do the Parks Master Plan to having workshops throughout the city and hearing from everyone across the board about what were the priorities.
We collected data about what the parks have.
Which parks are in the worst conditions? Where do we acquire new land and in which neighborhoods, which districts of the city need it the most? And then how are we going to pay for it? After that happened, the city council received this shiny new report that identified all of these things. That concluded the development of the Parks Master Plan.
When the city finally updated the Parks Master Plan and saw just the lack of investment and what was needed, it started to feel real and the steps of where to go to next to get an investment in our parks.
What the Parks Master Plan really highlighted was just the massive need, how much money 30 years of neglect had accumulated. Even if we were successful at getting the City of Fresno to redirect their general fund dollars back to parks, it still wasn't going to meet the need.
And in Fresno, the need was more parks. But that comes with a cost. How do you raise the money in order to identify opportunities to make critical green infrastructure investments like parks?
This is when I think the Trust for Public Land was really crucial and important in our partnership.
We come up with different ideas how to raise public dollars.
They helped with some research to help us think about, would it require a new sales tax or a property tax or a combination?
We conducted and paid for some early polling to go ask voters what they thought, what their opinion was. The numbers that came back basically said there was an opportunity.
If you told voters 3/8 tax and you will be able to see what your investment does, it will bring parks, it will bring arts, it is investing in youth jobs, it is doing this, that they would say yes.
And it was that kind of, again, shared learning that enabled us to make a decision.
I give credit to Sandra and Building Healthy Communities because they had the youth in the room. They didn't just sit in the back, they were at the table and their voices were being heard.
It was, again, young people who said we're willing to do the work to put a sales tax on the ballot before voters, to increase sales taxes in the city of Fresno slightly in order to create a dedicated fund for parks that later expanded to arts and trails. Because, again, young people understand that there needs to be something for everyone.
The idea was, let's go circulate a petition and see if we can put something on the ballot to essentially give parks and open space a seat at the table.
And it was through that kind of, thinking that we were able to then, as a community, bring in other folks beyond Fresno Building Healthy Communities to engage with us to write out Measure P that ultimately became the people's vision for the city of Fresno.
It's very easy to dismiss when one person complains, where maybe two people complain. But when you have a whole community that's advocating for something, it's very hard to dismiss that. So that's the beauty of us coming together and asking for these changes to create healthier communities.
We are a coalition of people of color. This showed up in the work in Measure P. Those young people that did the heavy lifting, those young people that changed the history of this community were Black, Brown, and Southeast Asian young people.
Measure P was like 3 raging rivers all flowing into one big thing.
We became a very diverse coalition that included folks that cared about traditional arts like the opera, but also cared about cultural arts like folklorico.
The
Parks Coalition agreed to include the arts in the initiative.
The Fresno Arts Council was a key player. Also, in addition to the Fresno Philharmonic, Arte Americas, Fresno Art Museum.
It was important that the coalition look at as many possible partners so that we could have a successful campaign.
A big piece of movements is always about mobilizing other people. Like, it can't just be your small table of group.
It was very good to see residents come together from all different parts of life, young and old, fighting for the same thing.
When the coalition asked the city to put it on the ballot, the city said no. Nope.
Earlier this week, Mayor Lee Brand announced a proposed sales tax initiative to raise $40 million a year. The money was supposed to be split 50-50 between public safety and parks. Thursday, the mayor withdrew his plan because of lack of support. In a statement, he wrote, "I believe this is the only measure of all the ballot measures that have been discussed that has any reasonable or possible chance of success in the November election," end quote. Sandra Celedon, president of Building Healthy Communities, disagrees.
The community saying, you know what, we're going to do this.
We reach out to all of our network. We basically ask for help. These adults that were doing this work in support of those young people helped collect over 11,000 signatures in less than 1 month to help us get over that threshold.
Some people blow us off and just walk past us, but some people to really engage and see the importance for parks and to sign their name.
There was a need for collecting thousands and thousands of signatures, and thankfully there was a great team that BHC had established to collect those signatures, but also all of us.
If you don't collect this many signatures by this date, you'll never get disqualified for the ballot.
We collected 35,000 signatures.
And we had more than enough to fulfill our requirement because we knew that some of the signatures might be declined.
At that point, too, you really understand how much one signature means.
We took boxes and boxes of these signed forms to City Hall so that we could get our initiative on the ballot.
And I remember when the ballots were brought for certification.
There's a motion and a second. Councilman Dangerfield?
Yes.
Bredefeld?
Yes.
Capriola?
Yes.
Chavez?
Yes.
Olivia?
Yes.
Brando?
Yes.
And Sori?
Yes. So the motion carries 7-0 unanimously. Thank you.
There was just such a feeling of success. Finally, we're getting this on the ballot.
A tax hike to improve parks in Fresno received the green light to appear on the November ballot. City council members voted for the ordinance after dozens of advocates spoke at today's meeting.
It is now up to Fresno voters to decide whether they want more parks in their city.
That was one step. We weren't done yet, but that was at least taking us closer to our goal.
Measure P, City of Fresno Clean and Safe, Neighborhood Parks Tax.
It was a very hard-fought campaign.
I just didn't understand why, because this was an investment in the community. This would mean more dollars for parks, more programs for young people.
I remember being so frustrated and upset by what I was hearing from local leaders who were panning this measure and saying things that weren't true about it.
The No on P campaign warns that if Fresno voters approve a sales tax for parks, public safety would suffer.
The biggest consequence to the citizens of Fresno, Measure P passes, they'll have beautiful parks, but they'll have deficient public safety services.
It was just a really bad feeling where you're doing the right thing, but the power structures are so selfish and greedy and self-interested that they're not willing to let something good like this happen.
Most political consultants will tell you that if you have the city council, the mayor, the police, fire, chamber of commerce all against you, you probably don't have a good chance to win.
It was those young people that had the ability to imagine a different Fresno who were not going to be held down by status quo politicians.
It was fun to see the excitement of the people that was involved with Measure P. Them come back and tell their stories of how they got a yard sign up or how they got a banner up or how they were able to convince this person who was a hard no to a hard yes.
We're 17, 16, some folks are 14 in the space who pushed this work and helped make it happen. It's just empowering.
It was those young people that inspired North Fresno white folks.
Maybe didn't live in South Fresno, but they were supportive of it because they lived in North Fresno. They knew that they had great amenities there, and they wanted the same for South Fresno.
We did a lot to engage our audience during the campaign period, but also to going to events like the Fresno Fair, staffing tables. So it was a very much on-the-ground effort to reach people, try to educate people about Measure P, encourage them to participate and vote.
The opposition for Measure P to try to inspire fear in people.
Supporters of Measure P say the funds will also go towards adding community service officers and park rangers to patrol the parks. But opponents of the measure say the city needs to focus on public safety.
Citizens sometimes will say, because we don't feel safe, we want money to go into public safety and not parks and arts.
If we created a dedicated pot of money for parks, arts, and trails, that it would somehow reduce funding for the police department.
Is this the right way to go about it? Is it appropriate to address the parks without either at the same time or first addressing the public safety needs that the entire community faces? And we don't think it is.
Which is so ludicrous to even say out loud because the police department already absorbs over 50% of the general fund.
Our job is to keep you safe.
We care deeply about our community.
We oppose Measure P because it takes away our ability to hire the additional personnel needed to keep Fresno safe.
We value parks, but Measure P is deeply flawed, and without addressing safety needs first, it would raise taxes and make things worse.
Please join us, the Chamber of Commerce and Mayor Lee Brand, in voting no on Measure P.
Nobody here is against parks, but we need a balanced approach.
There is a better way.
The biggest way to achieve safety is if I know my neighbor. It wasn't more cops. We just need to get to know each other. Green spaces help people do that. Safety is actually created by ensuring that young people have viable opportunities to engage in play and engage in after-school activities.
Police don't prevent crime, they respond to it. However, investing in parks, investing in youth, investing in public health, that prevents crimes.
Just because the establishment is against you doesn't necessarily mean that you can't achieve victory.
I was sad, disappointed, but I also knew, right, that it wasn't over.
Here's how the ballot measure reads. Shall the measure imposing a 3/8% sales and use tax estimated to generate $37.5 million annually for 30 years, funding city parks and cultural arts with independent oversight, be adopted? That's actually much shorter and less detailed than the intended message.
The ballot measure gets printed the wrong way, and it's like, oh, for crying out loud. Like, this thing is like surely not going to pass.
I remember the community going into City Hall and saying, this is wrong. You're giving wrong information to voters who are now seeing this, and it could impact the vote.
Supporters of Measure P are crying foul after they say the city submitted incomplete language to the Fresno County Clerk when describing Measure P on the November ballot. In fact, 75 words were left out of the description.
With Election Day fast approaching, Fresno City Council is defending itself after discovering a clerical error in the election handbook for Measure P. Among the language missing from the voter handbook: improving park safety, improving accessibility for persons with disabilities, updating and maintaining playgrounds and restrooms, improving youth and veteran job training, improving after-school programs, and beautifying roadways.
The meat of the measure got left out. So we're not saying it's intentional. It may have been inadvertent, but you still try to find a way to mitigate what you can with only a few days left till the election.
City leaders are now expected to meet Thursday to consider whether to mail out correction notices to the nearly 240,000 registered voters in Fresno.
That led to the city sending a corrected version to every voter in the city of Fresno with the correct language because they had made a mistake.
On Election Day in 2018, I think the mood, it was celebratory in the sense that, we had gotten so far.
We started at 6 a.m. trying to drive people to the polls.
They had different groups adopt corners of the city to just be out there with signs, Measure P, vote yes, remind people to go vote on that day. Either bring your ballot in or go to your closest poll site and vote.
We'd left it all out in the field. We had talked to as many voters as we could. We had knocked on all the doors. We had gotten the support of such a diverse swath of our community that we felt we were going to be victorious. We had a sense of pride that, whatever the outcome was, we did everything that was within our power to make it happen.
And this happened to be an election cycle in California with a record number of ballot initiatives statewide and local, like the most ever in history.
When I saw the Measure P on the ballot, I was happy. Just happy to mark yes, that I support this.
It was a roller coaster that whole night. How are we doing with Measure P? Like, where's Measure P? Oh, it's looking good. Oh, it's not looking good.
I remember that was the first time that I actually tracked the votes, watching the votes rack up and push in a bunch of different ways of it's pushing towards no and then pushing towards yes.
Eventually we had the understanding that it wasn't going to pass.
Election night, not a fun party. It was oh man, the early result, it was not going well.
CBS 47's AJ Cotto joins us live on the set with more on the measure. AJ.
Well, it is not looking good for Measure P supporters. As votes continue to be counted, the initiative would raise the taxes in Fresno. It needs a 2/3 supermajority vote to pass.
I just remember coming home that day and just breaking down with my husband because it just felt, I was disappointed that we didn't have an outright victory.
It's a close race for Measure P. That's the proposed tax hike to fund parks in the city of Fresno. As the results showed early this morning, it went down to defeat.
I wanted to be able to say that we could claim that victory that night, but we weren't able to.
Over 100,000 ballots still need to be counted at a secure warehouse. Workers must process 76,000 mail-in ballots and 24,000 provisional ballots.
We had to wait a few days before the elections office kind of got all of the votes in that we finally got to the 52%.
There was a debate because it was a citizen-led measure. It should just be a majority vote.
While this measure may have only passed with 52%, as I told the mayor that day, you only need 50+1.
You don't need this high 2/3 bar that has been traditionally used so that we can't make investments like Measure P.
We didn't get 66%, right, a supermajority, but we did get a majority. But then the city of Fresno refused to acknowledge that as a victory.
This is my first time voting, right? I'm supposed to believe in democracy. We get more than 50% of the votes, but yet you're telling me that it's not going to pass?
So it became a question about did we win or did we not win?
They did not lose. Getting to 52% was a win. What happened at that point was that it had not been tested on the legal front.
So going into the campaign, we understood that even if we didn't reach the 2/3 point, there was a possibility that through the court process, we might still prevail.
What Fresno BHC did after that really led with courage and integrity.
I clearly remember, having the conversation with our young people about this isn't a loss, this is a setback.
Sandra's commitment to young people to say, I'm with you on this till the very end.
The fight isn't over and we're gonna see this through. And that's really what motivated us and led us to the legal fight.
And through, the leadership from Sandra, realized this is gonna be a legal battle and it's gonna have to take some time.
And we went to the broader coalition too and we said, okay, we're gonna fight this in court. The broader coalition said, no, I think we're done. If you guys wanna do it, that's okay, but we're gonna see if maybe there's another way forward together with cutting a deal with the opposition.
But here's what they didn't count on. Every single person who worked on the campaign, our lives have not been easy. It has always been, you are the underdog. You're not going to win. You're not going to do it. And this is where we come and say, we'll show you.
Fresno BHC was the plaintiff and got that thing through the courts.
It was such a roller coaster too because we went through the kind of local court.
Believing that we were getting close and that we would take this victory, but then to get the devastating news.
To receive and to read that order that a local judge, someone from this very community, thought that it did require broader majority was devastating.
Judge, Parks tax measure needed 2/3 vote.
Taxpayer issue from last November's election in Fresno has been resolved. The results of Measure P will stand. A Fresno County Superior Court judge decided yesterday special taxes proposed by a voter initiative like Measure P are not exempt from the state constitution's 2/3 voter approval requirement.
But we made the choice to continue.
Supporters of Measure P had argued the 2/3 rule applied only to special taxes proposed by public agency.
Fresno Building Healthy Communities had to fundraise again to hire lawyers to actually challenge this decision in court. And so we appealed it.
The 5th District Court of Appeal has reversed the results of a 2018 parks measure in Fresno. A panel of justices say the Measure P sales tax actually passed. The appeals court says the measure needed only a simple majority instead of a 2/3 majority to pass.
Actually, this is a citizen-led measure. You gathered the signatures. You only need a simple majority, so you won.
Instead of letting democracy shine and simply saying, let's build these parks.
The current and future leaders of Fresno today issued statements in response to the ruling of Measure P. Mayor Lee Brand saying this, quote, "The city of Fresno will abide by the court's decision once it becomes final."
What happened is that the city's ego came into play again.
So the city did what I think people who have no courage do, which is they sat down and they let the Jarvis Tax Association do their dirty work, appealed the appellate court's decision, and we ended up at the state Supreme Court.
Do you expect the state Supreme Court to make their ruling on what the appellate court has decided on Measure P?
Well, we certainly hope so, right? I think we've seen other cases up and down the state that have been upheld.
It took 2 years to go through that process to finally get to a place where the court officially said, yeah, the people won. Measure P passed.
I was so happy, even though I was gonna see the fruits of this labor immediately, I knew that future generations were gonna get impacted by this.
If it wasn't for our youth, we wouldn't have Measure P, because the youth could have easily gave up and said we don't want to fight anymore, but they wanted to fight.
I'm very glad and thankful that BHC and the parties involved took it to court, and eventually it got reversed, right? In the middle of the pandemic, this is one of the best news that I've got.
It was one of the best Christmas gifts that could have happened for the community.
I knew they would come out victorious, and I thought, this is what people power does. It pushes people beyond the boundaries of what we even thought possible for ourselves. That's the beauty of campaigns like this. Everybody gets stretched to new heights that we didn't even know we could do.
When you start seeing these citizen-led tax initiatives in other counties that will fund critical mental health, that will fund critical parks, that will fund all of these resources, it is because of the leadership of youth, of women like Sandra Celedon, who believed that this could get done when everyone said no.
Here we are, a few years after the election, and so many other cities, including San Diego, who is looking at a citizen-driven initiative to support parks and libraries just like Fresno.
There's a new effort pushing for millions of dollars to be invested in improving libraries and parks in San Diego. ABC 10 News reporter Neil Watson is in Bay Park, where the group launched the Libraries and Parks for All campaign during a news conference. Organizers say they plan to get this funding initiative on the November 2022 ballot.
It'll require 50% plus one of votes in favor to pass. If the initiative passes, Stewart says an oversight committee will make recommendations to City Council on how to spend the money based on the two departments' master plans.
A nonprofit in Fresno could impact not just what happens in Fresno, but in all of California.
All of a sudden, everyone was looking at Fresno and wondering, how do I do that?
Any policy is only good as its implementation.
After Measure P was declared a win, in the language there has to be a commission that was formed. Names were submitted. I was nominated.
It was a beautiful day for me to see when Kimberly McCoy was selected to be on the Parks Commission, who was from the neighborhood, who had what we call lived experience of the issue, actually be part of the decision-making table.
And even with the wins that have been achieved, it's not over.
Kimberly was relieved of her duties. She was not offered a renewal, although some other people in the commission were asked to stay. And it was just another example of the challenges that we've seen with this government.
I felt really angry at the now mayor, Mayor Dyer, because he spoke out. He was on the no campaign.
Mayor-elect Jerry Dyer doubling down, saying, quote, "I look forward to working with the city council, community members, as we utilize these dollars to beautify our parks, trails, and meet the needs of our youth for decades to come."
We could have had the benefits of Measure P a lot sooner. We didn't have to be taken to court if it wasn't people like him and their privilege speaking out against Measure P.
I think about how now so many showing up to the ribbon cuttings and doing what politicians do.
Oh, you gotta love that. Mayor Dyer and Councilmember Miguel Arias getting into the spirit there. Other city leaders also joined them as they slid into the park for a ribbon cutting ceremony. The project replaces a couple of older playgrounds in the neighborhood. Now, the mayor says that this is one of many projects happening around Fresno.
We are in the process of doing the design phase for Roding Park, Woodward Park.
How hypocritical it is of them that they didn't do the heavy lifting, and that till this day they refuse to acknowledge the Black, brown, Southeast Asian young people who made that happen.
It's an ongoing battle to hold these systems accountable for equity.
We were very clear when we were making this measure that this money is for parks. Let's not lose the vision of why we made this effort.
Fresno is a great place to live, and thanks to the passage of Measure P, it's going to be an even better place because of those investments in parks, building resiliency in communities, strengthening neighborhoods, and engaging people in the design and development of these parks.
The work ahead, right, in the next 30 years is going to be really important for not just the young people that have been part of Fresno Building Healthy Communities, but other young people that are coming up, other residents that maybe they didn't have a role in getting Measure P on the ballot or getting it passed. But now they have a role in making sure that it gets implemented and holding the city accountable for making sure that those dollars are spent and invested in our communities the way that we wrote it and that way that our young folks envisioned it.
The City of Fresno is now officially collecting Measure P sales tax to pay for park projects.
The first year that when the City of Fresno started collecting the tax, it was expected that Measure P was going to generate $30 million. It generated $70 million a year in the first year alone.
Tonight, neighbors in South Fresno will soon start to see their Measure P dollars get put to good use. A new futsal court is coming to Hinton Park.
When it comes to soccer, there aren't many opportunities for children in this part of Fresno to go out and play and develop themselves. So hopefully this can mark the beginning of something new.
Fresno proved that if you have hope and you have great organizations like a Fresno BHC, then you can accomplish great things.
So the moral of the Parks for All, it's a David versus Goliath story.
Measure P demonstrated in this story David actually does win, coming together to defeat that giant.
If you believe in something that you're fighting for, you never give up.
We need people to be aware of what's going on, educating, moving people to take action.
Regardless of what neighborhood you come from, what race you are, what your life experiences, we all come together with the same purpose. We could beat a system that is against us.
Anybody, no matter who you are, if you're a 15-year-old in high school, you can still say something. You can still try to change something, and sometimes that change will happen. That to me is beautiful.
The opposition for Measure P, who think that the world is still going to be created for them and by them, who refuse to accept the reality, and that's that the future of Fresno is in color. The future of our community includes all of us. And it was the young people who actually demonstrated that that's not the reality that we will accept moving forward. That in fact, you're either going to join us or you're going to get left behind.